Hello everyone, today I am updating my naval aiming guide since there's been a lot of changes and there are a lot of new players coming into naval since Gaijin is adding in the big ships here pretty soon and a lot of players are going to want to grind to those. But the tutorial for War Thunder isn't that great, so we kinda gotta go elsewhere to figure out how all this aiming stuff works. Even though with some of the changes like in arcade, the aiming is pretty simple to get a hold of, but there are some nuances to it. Starting off though, if you are setting up your naval settings for the first time or this is a brand new account because you're switching over from another game, you're going to want to adjust some settings because going into naval with the basic settings that Gaijin gives you isn't the best. You're going to struggle with some stuff and it's going to mess you up in other cases. Some important ones to look at to change are in your control settings for the naval category. You want to make sure that you have ranging shot on and bound to a keybind. This allows you to fire turrets one at a time rather than all at once. So if you do want to just take a test shot at somebody, or if you wanted to ripple fire some guns that have a faster rate of fire, you can do that. The next setting is the turret ranging shot. It sounds similar, but this one actually helps you select if you want to fire a full turret as your ranging shot or just single barrels. This is a little bit more important on battleships because they have such a long reload. The next thing on these controls is your mouse wheel for naval. I have this set to distance correction. This is mainly for realistic. You won't really touch it in arcade, and you'll want to adjust the multiplier under it to your liking if you are going to play realistic. Moving on to the common category, all you want to do here is make sure that you have lock target set to a key you like. I believe for PC this is X by default, and that's what I've kept it as, and it works for me. But for the rest of these settings you are going to want to have a keybind there that you can memorize. Moving on to the options to change in the other menu. In your naval battle settings category, you want highlight projectiles fall point turned on as it adds a green tracer line behind your shells, making them easier to see and differentiate from others. This is only in arcade, but it is extremely handy when you're lobbing shells at a long range and everybody else is shelling the same target to tell where you are aiming, where you're hitting, and where you're missing. The next thing is highlighting target point. I'm not sure if this does anything anymore. It used to be basically how you aimed for arcade, but regardless, it's still good to turn on. The next setting is automatic target lock. You want to turn this off and just use the target lock keybind. Otherwise, it will constantly swap targets on you, or you won't be able to lock the specific target you want if they're all bundled up in a group, because the game will just select the first one you hover over or pick one at random. So definitely turn this one off and just use the keybind. Lastly, for your settings, turn off follow bullet camera. It is cool for cinematics, I guess, but it provides you minimal information in battle, and while you're watching your shell come in, you won't be able to watch the shells hitting your own ship and know when to dodge, or maybe a torpedo's coming in or something like that. So it leaves you very vulnerable, and it really it's very instant when it takes you out of your ship controls to the shell, and it's very weird to watch, so I would just turn this off. Otherwise you'll probably end up seeing your shell flight a lot, especially when you don't want to. With the settings covered though, we can move into the actual aiming, and we will start off with arcade as that's where most players, are, and where most players will start. So aiming in arcade battles is extremely simplistic right now. You point your cursor at an enemy ship, you lock it as your target, and you fire your guns when they're on target. The game calculates the lead and range adjustments for you, so as long as your enemy doesn't change course or speed, your shells should hit approximately where your cursor was. Aiming your cursor at different parts of the enemy ship directs your shell fire to those sections, sometimes to very devastating results. The only things you have to account for as a player are if your shells are plunging at long ranges, which will cause them to hit on the deck, or if the enemy ship is changing speeds due to player input or damage, like their engines being out. If the enemy ship is slowing down, Just aim more towards the aft of their ship to lead for the changes in speed that they will be making. The only thing that this aiming system struggles with is hitting enemy ships in a turn, as it only corrects for what the enemy ship's estimated position will be exactly when you fire your guns, not if it continued the turn. While you can try to correct for that yourself, sometimes the game has already over or underled your shells for range, and there really isn't any way for you to affect the range that your shells are fired at to any large extent, so it will actually miss even if you do get your lead right per just leading them for the turn. As far as adjusting your aim to deal with specific shell types, if you are firing high explosive ammo at ships and you can't penetrate their hulls with it, aim for the decks and superstructure and try to clear off all their lightly armored modules. For armor-piercing shells, try to aim below deck level for maximum effect. For both types, shift your aim once you destroy important modules, as they won't take any more damage until the enemy player repairs them. Overall, it is very easy to learn the arcade aiming system with a few downsides, as the game's calculations don't always quite do what you want. With arcade out of the way, we can move on to realistic. I'll admit at first that I'm not as familiar with the realistic aiming system to the same extent as I am with the arcade aiming system, and I am sorta rusty with it. The aiming system for realistic starts with selecting your target similarly to arcade, but once you do it, it will trigger a timer as your ship measures a lead for your guns to hit approximately in the middle of the enemy ship. This is indicated by a green bar to the right of your crosshair filling up, and once it is done, you will see an arrow appear in the vicinity of the enemy warship. This is the lead that your ship has calculated for your speed versus the enemy ship's speed. This will be continuously updated every time the updating range bar fills up again, and may change the arrow's position based on your speed or direction changes, or that of the enemy ships. You will also see a semi-regularly updating distance number under the enemy ship. If you and the enemy are staying perfectly still, this number won't change, and you can use your scroll wheel and mouse to adjust the gun's range, shown under your crosshair, to match this before firing. This gets a little bit more complicated when both ships are moving, as instead of just matching the range, you have to correct for closing or opening distance between the two of your vessels, as you are estimating where the enemy ship will be when your shells land. The amount you have to correct for this will increase or decrease based on your speeds and the distance between you and the enemy ship. If you do over or underlead the enemy ship, the UI in the top left corner will inform you on how far from the enemy ship your shells have landed, so you can adjust your gun's distance to correct and account for it. You will have to continuously change your gun's range, as the game does not hold your lead corrections, forcing you to manually change it for every ranging update. Keep in mind that switching locked targets will completely restart this process, and your ship will have to start measuring lead all over again. As far as hitting different parts of the enemy vessel, since the arrow is only showing you the aiming point for hitting midships on the enemy vessel, you can adjust your aim based around the arrow to account for the enemy ship's size and hit different modules and portions of it. Fine adjustments to your gun's ranging can also allow you to hit deck modules or plunge shells below the waterline to hit critical components like engines or magazines. Major flooding can also massively mess with the aiming, causing properly ranged shots to completely miss. Overall, this system is a lot more complicated to aim with, but can be more rewarding once you learn the nuances, as you can fine-tune your shots a lot more and aren't reliant on the server's calculations differing from your own. But that is the basics of both aiming systems. Hopefully this did help some people out a little bit. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions or corrections for this, and I'll see you in the next one. Good luck out there.